Transgender People Living in Today's Society by Amanda Jenkins, Katie Holt, and Milana Morgan. Intersectionality is a term that is used to help determine and understand how different social groups can intersect with each other based off of specific experiences and individual faces in their daily life. Even if you look at members of the same group, they still have different disparities. For example, you could have someone with lower income and someone with a higher income, but both identify as transgender. Having these different financial situations would bring different struggles to each person. Also, having different life experiences with upbringings as a transgender person could cause different hardships for someone. Intersectionality takes a look at an individual's race, gender, ethnicity, and sexual orientation in order to see where those aspects of someone's identity overlaps with one's life experiences and can cause oppression or privilege. Everyone has a unique identity that has been shaped by many different aspects in order to make them who they are today. The term transgender is an umbrella term that is used to define anyone who does not associate with the gender that they were assigned at birth. The most common types of transgender people are either people who were assigned male but identify as female, or people who were assigned female but identify as male. There are other categories of transgender which involve the mixture of multiple genders. Gender identity is the internal sense of being male, female, or anything else they feel they identify as. Gender expression is the way someone expresses themselves through their clothing, hair, characteristics, or behavior. When growing up, a person begins to develop their identity based on what they learn through social experiences. More so as a child, rewards and punishments are given depending on their behavior. Therefore, if a child begins to develop transgender traits, they may be punished for it and would feel ashamed to be their true self. An example would be if a boy started dressing in his sister's clothes or playing with her dolls, and his parents punished him for it or even went out and bought him new clothes or toys that were specifically for boys. This would make the child feel like his actions were wrong and that he should not want to dress or act the way he is feeling. The opposite of that would be if a boy dressed in his sister's clothes or played with her toys, and his family allowed him to do so, which would show him that it's okay to be himself and it would make him feel safe to express his true self and identity. If parents, family, friends, and society make small comments or force changes that cause someone to conform to their biological identity, it can cause them to remain closeted. In general, when society views someone as different, it can lead to backlash or bullying, and it can especially be difficult for school-age children. Bullying in transgender people in school most commonly takes place for biological boys who have feminine characteristics. Instead of enduring the bullying, most kids will suppress their true self and only show their masculine side at school or their biological assigned gender in order to fit in and avoid conflict. As someone experiences life, they often grow and change their views, thought processes, and behaviors. Trans people have learned to adapt based on society's views of them and whether or not they feel accepted. In one particular case study from the article Queers Without Money, a wealthy Long Island family kicked their son out when he began to identify as trans. He decided not to hide his identity even though his family was against it and began to navigate the world with no money or place to live. He found his own support system and was able to get on his feet as someone he wanted to be, not based off of society's definition of normal. Being your true self can be more empowering and warrant different opportunities that may have not been presented if one did not go through certain experiences, good or bad. Over the past decade, television and social media has drastically grown, allowing for new opportunities as a way to share new ideas, but it can also cause false advertisement in what is trying to be portrayed. An example of that would be the 2011 season Dancing with the Stars when Chaz Bono was one of the contestants. He was one of the first transgender people to be portrayed in the media. While this was important in the capability of the visualization aspect, it did not portray the transgender culture as a whole accurately. Bono is an upper-class white post-operative trans man, and not everyone who identifies as transgender can fit into the same exact category. By having one specific poster person in the media, It can create issues for other trans people in society and make them question their ideas of who they are and who they are expected to be and fit in with the standard ideals that society has for them as a trans person. At first, people of the trans community may feel that they do not fit in with their assigned gender based on societal norms, so they begin to identify as trans. But now the media portrays trans people as something not everyone of this community can identify as. This can be compared to anyone shown on TV. An example would be women celebrities, as they hold high standards of what females should look like. But in reality, there are so many different body types, heights, weights, face shape that make everyone unique.
So, what are values? The technical definition from Oxford Dictionary says that values are the regard that something is held to deserve, the importance, worth, or usefulness of something, as well as a person's principles or standard of behavior, one's judgment of what is important in life. Everyone has a different set of values based on what you believe in, who you are, and sometimes even how you were raised. So, to me, I value my friends and family, women's rights, standing up for what I believe in, as well as several other smaller things. But to anyone else, they're going to have a completely different set of values based on how they were raised and just things that they have always valued. But to the LGBTQ plus community, specifically transgenders, their set of values are going to be more based around independence, comfort, compassion, as well as equality in all matters of life, because unfortunately they don't get the same treatment that other people do. So they are going to be fighting more for their rights and wanting their values to be understood in regards to that kind of thing. So values of a culture play an important role in determining how one behaves, because specifically, if you grow up valuing something based on what your parents taught you or your religion, then if you meet someone that's different like that, then you are going to be you're going to treat them a different way, or you're going to behave a different way than they would. And that's just, I mean, it's normal, but it's just how values play a very big role in how people treat each other and how they behave around certain people. And compassion and authenticity are important not only for the LGBTQ plus community, but especially for transgender population. The chance to be able to invent their own relationships, participate in arts, create their own community with others while building their own culture are something that they take pride in and value completely. Everyone wants to feel safe in their own homes and feel wanted and accepted. So the creation of their own society together, like within the transgender community, but also bringing in other people that have the same values as them, is something that is greatly valued and accepted, because then they feel like they have people to support them and help them with help wanting they have others to kind of lean on and support them in times where they are going to need that to spread their values to other people and help others understand that their values are important as well. Not only are compassion and authenticity important to the transgender community, but also independence. Independence is something that is greatly valued in the transgender community, but while searching for stories related to independence with transgenders, I was lucky enough to read the story of Jamie Vallis. She tells the story of her transitioning and how she was not only able to find a sense of herself, but also how her family played a large role in it. Um, when reading the story, she explains that she was always sure of who she was. She knew from a young age that she felt like she was in the wrong body. She felt like she was too feminine to be considered a man, but not comfortable with the term gay, because she was so uncomfortable in this male body that using the term gay wouldn't have been as, I don't want to say satisfying, but as satisfying as just being a woman who liked men. So once she found out about the term transgender, she felt more comfortable and independent with who she really was. She felt as if she could be who she was meant to be, and that was a woman. She thankfully had her dad, who accepted and loved who she was and gave her that sense of independence that allowed her to finally become her true self. I'm sure I mean, she explains in the story that having her dad accept her and her family accept her really just gave her that push and that feeling of being allowed to be who she wanted to be, which is a form of independence. She's able to be who she wants to be and not have to feel as if she needs to please society and be what society wants her to be, but now is comfortable with who she is and able to go do things on her own without fear and just being more independent, which she wasn't able to have before her transitioning. So, something that has been discussed and fought for among all communities for years and years is equality. I mean, women have fought for equality in regards to men, lesbians, gay, and bisexual members have fought for equal rights when it comes to marriage, and transgenders as a whole are just fighting for equality among pretty much everything. They don't have a lot of the same rights as everyone else, and it is something that is greatly valued among the transgender community as well as every other community. I'm sure equal rights for everybody is just something that is very important, but in the transgender community, having the sense of equality is something that is very necessary. While trans people are increasingly visible in both popular culture and in daily life, we still face severe discrimination, stigma, and systemic inequality. Transgender individuals value the basic needs that we have from being quote unquote normal in society's eyes, like legal protection, safety against harassment and bullying, as well as basic health care. But because they are seen as different, quote unquote, they are not given any of that. They struggle to have basic health care. They don't get the same treatment if they are harassed, sexually violated, like in any form of violence. They don't get the same urgency, I guess, as a normal person would. I know in healthcare, a lot of them might not even get treatment if among doctors and nurses if they don't have a specific gender, which is obviously unacceptable, and they need equality, especially in healthcare. Thankfully, there are places and organizations that are put in place, for example, the National Center for Transgender Equality, that wants to give the transgender community the values they deserve. They want to change policies and society to increase understanding and acceptance of transgender people. In the nation's capital and throughout the country, the NCTE works to replace disrespect, discrimination, and violence with empathy, opportunity, and justice. Lastly, values specifically in the African American transgender community revolve around interpersonal relationships and impartiality. So, in the African American transgender community, interpersonal relationships are extremely valued. And of course, interpersonal relationships are by definition a strong or close association of acquaintance between two or more people that can last from a brief time period to an ongoing one. So, to African American and Black transgender individuals, having that close knit community with healthy relationships give them assistance and support in times where they will need someone. It's always nice to have a helping hand from people you trust, especially when you are in a position where you feel everyone is against you. Having that community and neighborhoods and social gatherings where you feel accepted and wanted and loved is very important to the Black African American transgender community, because they want to feel as if they belong, just like that's normal, and they really value acceptance and understanding with who they are. So from the website PRRI, I saw these few quotes about impartiality and discrimination, and how impartiality is something that is very valued in the African American community with transgenders, because it is meaning they want fair treatment. They want equal treatment of all rivals or disputants, or they just want fairness. And this quote from that website, PRRI, says Black Americans are more than any other racial or ethnic group to perceive discrimination against gay, lesbian, or transgender people. So, of course, they want treatment just as any other regular man or woman would want, and they want to be treated with this fairness and equality and have the same opportunities and treatment as everyone else does. And finally, this last quote says nearly 3/4 of Black Americans say gay and lesbian, which is 73%, and transgender people, which is 72%, face discrimination, which is the highest in comparison to Hispanics, which is 67%, white Americans, which is 59%, and then Asian Pacific Islanders, which is less than half at 49%. Lastly, I just wanted to kind of end my portion of this project with a quote from Gandhi, which says, "Keep your values positive because your values become your destiny," which I think is a very good way of prioritizing which values are the most important to not only myself, but kind of as a thought for you to think about, as for anyone to kind of figure out which priorities are the more important ones and might affect the entire society and people you care about rather than what could just affect you.
So, what exactly is tolerance? The definition of tolerance is the ability or willingness to tolerate something, in particular, the existence of opinions or behavior that one does not necessarily agree with. Tolerance is the lack of acceptance and embracing diversity. The word tolerance makes you think that you are just simply putting up with something or dealing with something. Tolerating allows us to remain ignorant on the individual struggles someone might be facing and lacks the understanding needed to come together as one. Tolerance is not always granted to diverse groups, especially the transgender community. Intolerance leads to fear, violence, decreased security, and negative views on one group. When you zone in on Black transgender or low social status transgender individuals, you see an individual that faces lack of tolerance in more than one category in their life. Maria Martin once said, "I can tolerate certain things in life, like a bad dinner, but I don't tolerate people. I don't tolerate diversity. We need to embrace and celebrate diversity and celebrate difference." This quote is powerful because in order to create equal opportunities and inclusive environments, we must embrace and accept different diversity groups, including those of the transgender community. There is a ridiculous amount of evidence that demonstrates intolerance that has affected the transgender community negatively. The lack of acceptance has led to the fear of repercussion in the military, rejection from emergency shelters, denied access to restrooms, and an increased prevalence of depression. These are just few examples out of the hundreds that represent the intolerance and discrimination of transgender persons. There has been an ongoing battle of tolerance of transgenders in the military. It has been almost a decade since the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy was repealed. This meant that the LGBT community were able to be out and proud in the military. However, many of the LGBT community still hide their sexuality or gender identity in fear of repercussion, hostility from leaders, and decreased opportunities to grow in positions. Many of the troops felt as if the policy was repealed, but the organization culture remained the same. Just recently, the Trump administration implemented a ban in 2019 that reversed a previous policy that allowed trans men and women to serve openly and to continue receiving medical care related to their transition while enlisted. This ban prohibits anyone from enlisting as their gender identity and making them enlist as their biological sex. This continues to be an ongoing battle for any transgender service member. Another area of intolerance and gender discrimination is the rejection of transgender individuals from emergency shelters. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD, proposed a new rule that would reverse the current equal access rule. The equal access rule protected transgender persons by allowing shelter placement based on gender identity, sexual orientation, or marital status. This new rule would base shelter placement by strictly the biological sex of a person. If a transgender person is turned away from an emergency shelter, they must look for alternate shelter options. However, in a recent study, 86% of transgender respondents indicated that an alternate shelter location was either somewhat difficult, very difficult, or not possible to find. This creates danger and safety concerns for those in need of shelter. As if being rejected from public shelter isn't enough, some of the transgender population have experienced being completely denied of bathroom use. In 2016, the country was consumed with national media and legislators debating on the rights of transgender bathroom use. The results from the 2015 U.S. Transgender Survey are quite shocking. 9% of respondents reported that they were simply denied access to a restroom, 12% reported being verbally assaulted, and 59% avoided using a public restroom to avoid confrontations or other problems that they might face. It is also very alarming that nearly 1/3 of all respondents limited what they ate or drank during the day to avoid having to use a restroom in the public setting. Avoiding restrooms has not only been unfair and demeaning for transgender community, but it has negatively affected the health by leading to urinary tract infections, kidney infections, and kidney-related problems. This is a very severe case of intolerance and gender identity segregation. With all the barriers that transgender community has to encounter, major depression disorder and severe depression symptoms are common in this population. In 2016, research was published on the perception of community tolerance and prevalence of depression among transgender persons. It was found that depression was common and strongly and consistently associated with the patient's perceptions of community tolerance. This research proved that the lack of tolerance could be detrimental to an individual's health, especially in the transgender community. Dealing with intolerance of being transgender is already difficult enough, but then adding another diverse group of race, religion, or social status, and you get a tangled, difficult mess of intersectionality. Black transgender individuals face more intolerance than those of white transgender individuals. The 2015 U.S. Transgender Survey painted a clear picture on just how the Black transgender individuals experience greater mistreatment. The survey questioned transgender persons on their interactions with police and law enforcement. Only 2% of white transgender persons indicated that they were physically attacked by officers, in contrast to the 12% of Black transgender persons that indicated they were attacked by police officers. This means that the Black transgender community is 6 times more likely to be attacked by the police than the white transgender community. In all the categories related to experiences of police mistreatment in the past year, the Black transgender respondents always had a higher percentage of mistreatment than the white transgender respondents. Another reflection of disadvantages of being Black and transgender is seen in the unemployment rate. Black transgender unemployment rate is 20%, which is twice the unemployment rate of Black U.S. population. This shows that just changing your sexual orientation to transgender doubles your chance of being unemployed. These numbers are sickening, and I hope that the nation moves forward with more acceptance and they begin to embrace the transgender community.